Hello and welcome back to another Craig and Dave Unscripted. So we're actually going to do a two-part video about homework, and we'll get onto that in a bit. I'll let Dave introduce that. But first, we've got another lovely shout-out to do, Dave. So we had a student contact us last week. So it's for, we didn't get the name of the school. We did email you back, Jack, but unfortunately we didn't get a reply in time to record the Unscripted. But the email was from Jack, and it's from Jack, Frankie, Freddie, Miles, and Jake. And it's their teacher, Mr. Bowler, who, if I remember right, is leaving. They say they're big fans of our resources. They watch our videos. And what was really nice is they basically said in the email that he's been a great teacher, really enthusiastic. And they just wanted a little shout out to say, thank you very much, Mr. Bowler. So, I mean, you know, that kind of stuff is lovely. It's nice to hear, you know, about our resources being used in other schools, but it's just as nice, if not more so, to get these little messages from students. You know, you've made a difference to them. They're going to miss you. We don't know what year groups they are. We don't know what school it is, but Mr. Bowler, they reached out to us, and this is a personal little thank you from them and from us. So thank you very much. Right. So as I said, we're going to do a two-part video on homework. So this week is part one. I'm going to hand over to Dave to introduce it. But as with a lot of our recent Unscripted, we're basing this off sort of blog and educational articles that we come across. So this one was titled How to Stop Homework Being Stuck in the Past by Lisa Lockley. And while Dave introduces this, I'll just put the complete link up on the screen, because as always, you can go and read the source of what we'll be discussing. So Dave, you came across this then. So what sparked your interest?
Yeah, so I came across this actually some time ago, and it's been sat in our queue of videos to record for quite some time now. But of course, all aspects of teaching and learning interest us, not least homework, because you know we've got quite strong views about homework and its purpose and how to make it more purposeful. So this particular article by Lisa certainly piqued my interest. And like a lot of the discussions that we have at the moment, they're based on these articles from the Times Educational Supplement. And it's worth us just reiterating, like we do every time we do this, that we're not affiliated in any way with the Times Educational Supplement. They are not sponsoring this video or anything like that. It is simply that we think the Times Educational Supplement is a great source of articles for teachers. Even if you don't agree with everything that some of the diverse range of authors propose, at least it causes you to pause and reflect and sort of think about, you know, where your views originate and whether you have you know, a strong basis on which to hold your views. And so the reflection opportunities from these articles, I think, is excellent. So whilst we're not affiliated with TS in any way, I do think it's an excellent source for teachers to reflect on their pedagogy. And so I'm happy just to sort of shout them out as well. So yeah, let's have a look at this particular article then, Craig.
Right. So this is it. So Lisa Lockley, How to Stop Homework Being Stuck in the Past. Right.
Yeah, so what Lisa says is, you know, as our classroom practices have evolved, our approach to homework hasn't, but there's an easy answer. So let's start with sort of why do teachers set homework? And perhaps we'll do that by just reading out the first paragraph from this and reflecting on that a little bit. So Lisa writes, in its traditional form, homework often measures little more than the resources students have at home, their amount of parental support and hours of free time, and their desire to please their teacher. So what do we mean by homework in its traditional form, Craig? Well, you know, why do teachers set homework?
Oh, blimey, this is the whole Unscripted all on its own. And of course, you just throw me in with this one. Why do teachers set homework? Well, if I want to be really contrary, I could probably just say teachers set homework because it's the school policy, or because that's what teachers have always done. That's what we had when we were at school. That's what our parents had when they were at school. Homework's a fundamental thing. And of course, one of the things we do in this video is pause to say, just because you've always done it or because you're told to do it, doesn't mean it's what you should be doing, or there isn't a better way of doing it, which I know is where we're going to be heading. But why do teachers set homework? Well, we've always done it. Homework's always been a thing. It's good enough for me. It's good enough for you. It's a great one, isn't it? And again, absolutely no doubt, teachers up and down the country, if you're listening to this, you'll have some homework policy or a homework calendar, how quickly it should be marked, how often. So there's the cynical part of me. The less cynical part would say, well, we if you are asked by a parent why you do it, we're doing it to consolidate the learning, obviously we've done some learning in class and we want them to consolidate that and sort of double down and revisit the topics after the event to help move it into long-term memory. And none of those arguments are invalid, but I guess we're going to be taking a bit of a deeper look into how to make those statements mean something and how to get the most out of those things, which we often say as teachers. I don't know. Is that the answer you wanted?
Yeah. No, it absolutely is. You highlighted those two things really that were on my mind, which is, it's something that everyone's experienced through their childhood. Parents often have this view, well, if it was good enough for me, it must be good enough for them. And it's often about, consolidating knowledge at the end of the lesson, but it's fraught with difficulties when you do that. And Lisa kind of alludes to that a little bit when she says homework often measures little more than the resources students have at home. So there's an assumption there she's making that homework tasks, rely on them having something at home to enable them to do the homework. But perhaps that's not the biggest barrier. It's this next bit, their amount of parental support. And we know that students have a wide range of parental support at home. And I think, you and I both agree that if you're setting homework that a child can't do because it's intended to stretch and challenge them, then perhaps actually that's not the best use of homework, and it should be something that a child is actually capable of. And speaking as a parent, I'm a little bit frustrated actually with my own child's homework at the moment. So he's frequently coming home with maths homework, and he's not the most confident mathematician, and he's currently doing ratios, and he's saying to me, I can't do this homework, can you help me? And I'll be honest, it's quite a while since I learned sort of ratios, and some of the questions that he's being asked actually need to be attempted as algebra as questions. And I'm frustrated that it requires me to become the teacher, and the methods that I might use are not necessarily methods that he's been taught. And then we get into this conflict situation, and it's just, he's frustrated, I'm frustrated. And I just think to myself, come on, teacher, why did you allow that child to go home without a secure knowledge to be able to actually do the work that you've set them? And I think in that situation, that's a very poor use of homework, actually. And of course there are plenty of tools out there like Hegarty Maths and so on that will help and guide the student through, but often it's not a good substitution for the teacher. And so although my child does have Hegarty Maths, he often finds that the videos are not as good as that one-to-one tuition, and that's a bit problematic. So I think Lisa's onto something when she says, it relies on the amount of parental support at home, and we've got to be very careful, I think, when we set homework, how much reliance there is on the parents. And I think if there's any reliance on the parents, then it's a poor homework, actually. Because I know some teachers have said, oh, well, it's good to work with the student, and it's good to build that rapport and relationships at home and work on it together and do the research together. But I think when teachers do that, they forget how busy and tired parents are. Parents are often working full time themselves. And when they get home, they've often sort of got things to sort of carry on and prepare for the next day, especially if they're in those kinds of professions, or they might be working an awful lot of hours or shift patterns and goodness knows what. And they just, they want to support their child, of course they do, but they just might not have either the subject knowledge or the capacity. And I think that's a real problem that's overlooked by far too many teachers, actually.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing you said earlier, by the way. You may even have the subject knowledge and the capacity, but who's to say the way you're teaching them to do it. It's the current way which teachers are being told. Things evolve, and that's the thing, you know. Phonics was a big thing in school, but that's not how we were taught things. And now there's talk that maybe that's not the best way of doing it. And it's not even that, is it? It's like, oh, actually, are we using our knowledge, and is that a bad way of covering and teaching that concept? Is that actually going to add to the confusion for that student in learning it, than actually help them? So even with the capacity and the knowledge, it's a tricky minefield.
So I want to take a slight segue
Okay.
here before we get back onto the main article, because you know how we like to be a little controversial, and,
Yeah.
and I'm sure there's more controversy to come later. But what do you think of homework? And I'll sort of lay out where I am with it and allow you to sort of, I haven't actually asked you this question offline at all, so it'd be interesting to get your perspective. I mean, my personal view of homework, quite controversial, is I don't agree with it, actually. As a parent and as a teacher, I don't actually want to set homework. I don't agree with it in principle. And the reason for that is because I think if you're putting challenge and pace and high demand on students for 5 hours a day, which is a typical kind of school day, and then if you extend that to extracurricular activities and clubs and other things you want them to be involved in, then that could be 6 hours a day as a minimum. And if you then want them to engage in out of school activities, which I also think are extremely valuable, you know, if they go and do some volunteering or charity and community work, or maybe they go to football or judo or whatever in the evenings and weekends, then do you know what? I think actually you are already challenging that child enough. And I think they need downtime, and I think they need time to play and interact with their peers when it's not focused entirely on what we would call learning. Because I think there are plenty of learning experiences just from living your life and being a child and learning and growing up and interacting with your peers in a social way. So I personally don't really want to set homework because I don't believe in it. I think if you challenge a child for 6 hours a day, then that's enough, and they shouldn't need to do homework, is my view. Now, of course, I have no choice but to set homework, because that's, as you said earlier, what the school policy says, and it's what parental expectations are. And so I have to find a way of making that purposeful, but with the minimum, for me anyway, for the minimum amount of challenge for the student, because I don't really want that part of the day to be challenging for either them or their parents. And in a moment, I just want to, as I remember as I'm talking, I want to just briefly mention a very innovative thing that one of my previous schools did, and the impact of that.
I was going to bring this up in my Hattie discussion, but go on.
Okay. Well, we might come to it a little bit sooner, and then we might reflect on it in that segment as well. But anyway, what's your view on homework? Because I realise my view is quite controversial.
Well, yeah, as part of this, I might go down a little bit of a Hattie rabbit hole, and I'll explain what I mean by that to people. I think for the vast majority of my career, homework was just a given. It's what you did. I did it. I marked it. It was a pain. I can't think I probably thought too much of it. Then I got into looking at educational research, and obviously this chap called Hattie. And having come out the other side of that, and I'll briefly summarize that in a minute. I think, what do I think of homework? I think that 95% of homework that is set for children in schools, here we go, is meaningless and is not a significant benefit to the student and an unnecessary burden for the teacher. I think homework set well for a purpose is still very valid. So if I could just unpick that for a little bit. So for those who aren't aware, Hattie, current researcher, alive and well, Australian lecturer, has dedicated his life to not doing new academic research, but to bringing together the thousands of academic studies that already exist and trying to pull up some trends. And out of all of that, he's ranked all the different things that have an effect on a student's achievement and effectively give them a score. And there's a whole bunch of maths behind this. It's all been peer reviewed. Just look up Hattie on the internet, and if you're not aware, you'll be blown away. And when he did this, something quite surprising came out. Everything that has an effect on a student's achievement has what's called an effect size. And long story short, if something has an effect size of 0.4 or more, it's of valid educational benefit to the student's learning and their achievement. And if it has an effect size of less than 0.4, then it's not that it's worthwhile, but it's that the importance and the impact of it is increasingly negligible. And guess what? Hattie's research showed that the effect size of homework was 0.29. That there was, I think at the time of that study, 89 other things that you and your school could be doing that have a better effect on a student's achievement than setting homework. Now, I'm going to get into that in a little bit more detail, but I know one of the schools you used to teach at got on this research and other research, and it was like, actually, you know what? This is not a great use of our time. The demand on teachers chasing, and you had a school that was very brave, didn't you? And they actually went, you know what? We're backed by research. We know we're doing the right thing. There are better things we could be spending our time on. And your school instigated, or previous school instigated, a no homework policy, didn't it? And well, I know the outcome of that. Braved, you communicated it to parents, students. It was yeah, you got rid of homework. How did that go for your school, Dave?
Well, you see, I think you jumped to conclusions a bit there with when you said your school adopted a no homework policy, and I think that was the issue. I think it was perceived by all and sundry as no homework, and of course, the media picked up on this, the local media, and sort of ran with it in terms of, oh, there's no homework at X school, what are they doing? And then parents picked up on it. And because, of course, they've got this built-in assumption that homework must be a good thing, and it must be something that you have to set because I did it at school. And, what evidence is there really? What are they drawing on to say that, they're making valid comments? Anyway, so it wasn't no homework. What it was this thing called STAR, okay? Student Tasks and Recognition, or Student Tasks, Awards and Recognition, something like that. Anyway, nice little acronym that kind of ended up being STAR. And I really liked this. It wasn't my idea. It was a deputy head's idea. And I just think he was way ahead of his time. I think that was the problem. And he introduced this idea that there isn't no homework, but there is a pool, if you like, of tasks that you can undertake as a student. And you have to do so many hours in a week. But the time when you do it is kind of up to you, and the tasks that you choose are up to you. And in that pool were all the subjects, so students could focus on the things that they enjoyed doing the most and kind of excel and master certain things, which was nice. And then there were very sort of academic tasks in there, based on what they've been learning in that topic in their lessons. There were sort of research tasks to kind of extend things a little bit further. But I think this is the bit that was problematic, perhaps, was that also in that pool were all those other things, those extracurricular activities. So if you went to orchestra, for example, you could bank that as homework. If you went to a karate class outside of school, you could bank that as homework. So all the extracurricular activities were also in the pool to choose from. And we didn't think that was a bad idea at all. If you had a student that was particularly sporty and musical, and they wanted to double down on their sport because they were playing for the school football team, and then they did football practice in the community on a Saturday morning, they could double down on their football and they could count all those tasks towards their homework. So the idea was that students were pursuing their own interests and they were doing homework, but just not what you would traditionally call homework. And it was all sort of beneficial because obviously being part of the football team is representing the school and taking responsibility. If you were doing football in the community, then again, you've got certain time management, you've got teamwork skills, and all sorts of, other things as well as the skill of the game. And so, it's all all very valid in my view. But of course, what happened was parents took the sort of attitude that you just articulated, which is there's no homework. And they kind of ran with that when that wasn't actually the truth. Now, what happened was that some, like a lot of these things in school, it was quite divisive. And some parents were over the moon because it suddenly meant there was less pressure and their child could focus on what they wanted to do. And it was brilliant, you know. And it was the most sort of innovative thing in the country, if you like. And then there were other parents that were just horrified because they just thought, you know, no, homework has to be academic, has to consolidate what they're doing in the lessons, it has to extend their learning. And if they're not in front of a textbook and an exercise book for at least a couple of hours in the evening, then they're going to fall behind their peers. It's going to, you know, completely destroy their life chances and career prospects. And they just sort of took that attitude. Now, what happens in school is that you often end up with quite a vocal minority. And that vocal minority will make their presence really well known at the school gates, in emails, in contact with other parents. And of course, that momentum grew because parents were really passionate about this. And as that momentum grew, we ended up with some parents who decided to take their child out of school and say, well, if you're going to have this attitude to homework, then I'm going to remove my child from the school. And that's what they did. And of course, that drew more media attention when that happened. And so after a while, after a few months, even though it was very successful, after a few months, we basically had to say, well, look, you know, what do we want to do? Do we want to be the school that parents want to send their children to? Or do we want to be that school that's always in conflict with parental belief? And that's really what it came down to ultimately. And so, you know, after holding the line for quite a few months, in the end, the head teacher just buckled and said, actually, okay, if parents want traditional homework, we'll go back to traditional homework.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you've got the difference there between the benefit of homework, and we're going to talk about it. And when we do set homework with Craig and Dave, but we've done a lot of research setting homework, not setting homework, and then the perceived parental importance of homework because of the way that you did it. So we're not suggesting homework in the traditional sense, and we'll get on to that. And that actually nicely brings me back to Hattie again. So you can, and this is another a warning to people, we say a lot about research, but you've got to be careful with research. As I said, Hattie did this study, it's great, and you could hold that study up and go, homework has an effect size of 0.29. It's not worth it. We're not doing it. But Hattie himself will tell you that what he is doing is providing a synthesis of multiple meta-studies. And of course, a meta-study is an amalgamation of dozens of other studies of a similar type. So what you end up is a big average. So when you take, you know, and he has researched hundreds and hundreds of other research studies, the overall effect size of homework is negligible. When you start to unpick that research, you realize this is taking into account all studies on homeworks at all levels, at all schools and all ages. If we just focus on the effect size of homework in secondary schools, suddenly the importance and the effect on a student's achievement is 0.64. It now has a significant effect. It has a significant effect on older children and younger children. So now if we talk about year 11s and year 13s, so examination year, the effect size goes up even further. And, you know, there are further studies that then say if your homework is tweaked like this, or you do X or you Y, or you make sure you know, then it goes up and up and up. So there's again a word of caution, because Dave and I do spout on a lot about research, and everything we do is based on research, but it can be very easy to jump onto a piece of research, especially a meta study, or in Hattie's case, a synthesis of many meta-studies, and go, well, homework's useless, there's the research. Hattie himself will tell you it's not quite as simple as that. So that's why I said earlier, I think, controversially so, but maybe 90% of homework is not purposeful and probably isn't of benefit. But there are certainly ways of delivering homework, of targeting the homework and managing the homework, which make it far more useful and of a benefit to the student, you know, and therefore, you know, for the teachers as well. So I guess that's where we're heading. I see you put the next question on, which I kind of answered. What does the research say? Yeah,
well, you were just talking about the research, so I thought we'd put the question up, and I think you've basically answered that question. So let's let's go back to the article before we talk about, our views of sort of what we do in the, sphere of homework and the limitations that we've got. Let's just go back to the article just for a moment. So, okay. So what Lisa says is, over the year, as the landscape of curriculum design and assessment has changed, homework has not. Well, I think that's a sweeping statement. I mean,
Sure.
Homework has changed quite a bit in many schools. And I think that one of the problems here is that often you only reflect on your own school experience and think that applies universally to everyone. And I think here, Lisa's kind of falling into the trap of, just assuming that homework hasn't changed for anybody. And I just don't think that's true. If we carry on reading a moment. So then she's written, that's why homework should be replaced with focused retrieval practice. The importance of knowledge, begetting knowledge, should be front and center of all we do, including homework. And we need to clearly signpost to students and parents alike that knowledge drives progress. Well, whoa. I'll put the brakes on a minute, Lisa. Again, I just think that Lisa falls into the trap of, I'm a senior leader, I know best. And actually, I agree with a lot of what Lisa's saying, but you've got to be cautious here that it's a very sweeping statement to say, that's why homework should be replaced with focused retrieval practice. And there's a bit of a phrase that says, in order to get your school from requires improvement or inadequate to good, in Ofsted speak, then you need to tighten up. And in order to get from good to outstanding, you need to loosen up. And I think that's really interesting. We could talk about that for a long time, but in essence, I think the risk here is that there's a one size fits all, and that, all subjects should all be doing the same thing. And I think if and when you do that, and I've got other stories I could tell about that, but not for today, where my school has done that. When you do that, it actually loses a lot of impact that was originally gained by what your subject is doing is a little bit unique and different to others. So I just think, we just got to be a little bit cautious here that there's an assumption that one size fits all and, this is the best way to do homework. And I would just contest that. I think there are many paths to success. I think Lisa is slightly at risk here of assuming there's one way. However, where I do definitely agree is this idea that knowledge drives progress. I definitely agree with that. But should all homework be replaced by focused retrieval practice? No, I don't think so. I think there's a place for focused retrieval practice, and I think it can be part of the bigger picture. And I'm a big advocate, actually, of focused retrieval practice because that's what we do with Smart Revise, clearly. Yeah. But I don't think it should be the only homework you can set. That's where I would disagree with Lisa. So I don't know what if you've got anything to add to that, or do you want me just to carry on?
No. I agree. I was just digesting what you were saying. You're right. It's interesting. I don't think there's anyone out there who really, no matter how long they've been in education, can make sweeping generalized statements, and we never do, and we can't, and it's I do get the desire, by the way, when you're writing a blog or an article, especially for the test, for another magazine where you want to come across as an authority in your area, and I've no doubt Lisa probably is, but education simply isn't that black and white. It just isn't. There's a lot in here where I'm in complete agreement with Lisa. But yes, there's another sentence: retrieval practice homework trumps everything else. Well, statements like that just I'm sorry, Lisa. That it's not that black and white in education. We totally get the importance of retrieval practice, beating the forgetting curve, spaced learning, all that. We've built it into the heart of one of our major course companion, our electronic product, Smart Revise. we've talked about that before. So it's absolutely spot on, but it doesn't trump everything else in all situations. So I think that's where you've got to be careful. I do understand why people who write articles maybe come across a bit more like that. It's I'm writing this article, I want it to have some impact and some gravitas, but I think you do have to be a bit careful. It's
yeah, and it's fair to say, and you can get our views on this page of our website, and it's fair to say that I've written those articles on our website very directly, very authoritatively, sort of, this is the way, okay? But what I'm trying to put out there is this is Craig and Dave's way. So if you buy into our resources, you're not just buying a set of resources, you're buying sort of almost into a sort of a way of thinking, a pedagogy. And it's to get the best out of those resources, you need to understand where we're coming from. Otherwise, you'll implement our resources in a way that you think they're written and intended for, and they won't be as successful because they weren't written in that mindset. They were written in a different mindset. So our resources can be really, really successful, and they're proven to be exceptionally successful actually with students, both in their love of learning and in their attainment. But they are written with a particular teaching style in mind. And if you don't understand that, then it's going to come up short. And that's why I've written our articles in a very sort of authoritative way as well. So absolutely. But retrieval practice as homework trumps everything else. And this is where I just think it's so risky when you get senior leaders that start making decisions for the subject leaders. And I don't think that's their role, okay? I think what you should be doing is empowering your subject leaders to make the right decisions for the learners of that subject, and using their strong subject knowledge and pedagogy as the springboard to accelerate your whole school aims, ambitions, objectives, ideals, call them what you like, okay? And so I think what a senior leader should really be doing is saying, this is the intent of our school. This is the intent of our curriculum. This is what our curriculum should be doing, okay? Now, when you implement that school improvement plan or that school aim and ambition, how is homework in your department meeting that improvement plan? What is your implementation to enable the intent? That's what you should be doing as a senior leader. But all too often what happens is the senior leader says, here's our intention, and by the way, here's our implementation. And that's a step too far, because it should be down to the subject leaders to determine what the best implementation is of that intent. Now, don't misunderstand that. I'm not saying that the school leaders should be running the school and coming up with the school improvement plan. I mean, they've got a role to play in that for sure, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the school leaders should be dealing with intent, and the subject leaders should be dealing with the implementation, and then the school leaders can deal with both actually can then deal with the impact. So this is our intent. This was your implementation. What's our understanding of the impact? And then obviously you can make changes from there. And I just think Lisa's just making sweeping statements here that I think is slightly risky.
That's interesting. I don't want to go too much into it, but I do remember a certain deputy head at the school I used to teach at had an idea and a policy about how we were going to change assessment. And I remember it being presented to all the middle leaders in our sort of like bi-termly meeting. So all the middle leaders are there, all the year heads, the senior leaders, and this deputy head presented this new way we're going to do assessment, and said this is what it's going to do. So kind of presented the intent, and then told us how it was going to work, the implementation. And you could see the looks around the room. And I remember one of the slightly more, I was a bit new as a head of department. I remember one of the slightly more stuck in their way heads of department who'd been there for a long time and didn't mind confrontation. He said, so you've asked us for feedback on this and everything, but this is the way you want it done, isn't it? And he just asked, he's like, we're going to do it, aren't we? We're going to do this that you've shown us in this way. I was like, yeah, basically, yeah. So he wasn't asking for our feedback at all. And by the way, the intent, as you say, the intent was excellent. It was valid. It was, we could all see the benefit. Oh yeah, no, good. But this is the way you are going to do it. Has anyone got any questions on it? Like your feedback. I know this head of department just cut through it and was like, you're not really asking us what we think of that. You're telling us this is the way we're going to do it. Yeah, I guess I am. And of course, what happened is there was a lot of resistance because we weren't brought along on that journey. So interesting. You've just made me think of that. I'd completely forgotten that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is it. So, yeah, I think, like I said, okay, let's make sure we've got some perspective here, because I don't go into, looking at everything schools do and my default position is to criticize it. No, not at all. So, when I said earlier that if you're in a school where it's, graded as inadequate or requires improvement by Ofsted, then you probably don't have enough standardization in the practices across the school, and you probably do need to tighten up. And it is right for the senior leaders to make sure that there's a baseline level of consistency. And it's only when you're a good school you can then say, okay, well, from good to outstanding, then we need to stand out, right? That's what the word means. And so what is it that we're going to do about our curriculum that is going to allow that innovation, that's going to allow the subject teachers and the subject leaders to innovate in their own subject area so that they stand out? And that's the difference. And the way that I would put that is, if you're manufacturing crisps and there's no quality control with your crisps, then they're going to require some improvement, right? But once you've got the quality control on your crisps, then there's no reason that you can't then have a barbecue flavor, a paprika flavor, a salt and vinegar flavor, as long as those crisps are meeting the standards of what this brand says their crisps should be like, and it's packaged in a particular way and it's fresh, then within that, I think you can have some innovation in the flavors. And I think that's where school leaders go wrong.
What an interesting analogy. Right. So what we have done, and based on the last 40 minutes, is we've given our controversial views on homework. We do use it, we do set it, and we do suggest it as part of Craig and Dave's pedagogy. But we've also thrown research and also admitted that an awful lot of homework out there is, we feel, probably not fit for purpose and is not, delivering the sort of impact that it should have. So of course, what you're probably all asking is, well, come on then, what's the Craig and Dave way? Well, you're gonna have to tune in next week. So yes, we wanted to sort of we like to unpick these things, and that in essence is what today's video was. But we are going to take the benefit of all this research and say to you, so what is it we recommend, or what is it we do in order to support our resources? You won't be surprised, it has a little bit to do with flipped learning, but we won't just say flipped learning and leave it there. So we're going to return next week and say do a part 2, purposeful homework the Craig and Dave way. Was there anything else? I didn't want to sort of wrap up if you had other key bits you wanted to say though, Dave.
No, not at all. I think that's a perfect introduction to part 2. So so if your students watching this, when we get to part 2, we'll tell you why your teachers that are using Craig and Dave resources are making you write notes, and we'll explore that in a lot more detail. Absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, just before we end, I mean, if you're watching this video as it goes out live on Monday, the 21st, just to let you know, we're at Bet this week. So we will be traveling down on Tuesday, and we are there all week. If you haven't got tickets already, it's probably a bit late for you to ask school permission to get out. But if you are coming, you'll find us on stand NA55. So we'll be there on Wednesday, Thursday and Friday of the week commencing the 21st of March. But yeah, that's it from us. We'll see you next week when we'll look at part 2 of this series on homework. See you then. Bye-bye.